Welcome everybody to the Saphira Center of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient esoteric practices of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It's an honor to have you here with me as always. Definitely check out my membership programs if you have interest in joining. These are in the first and second links within the description of this video. There's lots of very exciting stuff up and coming, so definitely check those out. First link for the premium membership service and the second link for the Patreon. I look forward to seeing you over there. So today we're going to be discussing Qliphothic healing and the nervous system. Qliphothic healing refers specifically to Qliphothic initiation, which is the exploration and descent through the dark Kabbalistic tree, the dark feminine side of the Kabbalah, as well as just the invocation of Qliphothic deities, referring specifically to infernal spirits. Daemons is what we are referring to. But generally speaking, there is a big misunderstanding and realistically just a lack of information in terms of how these energies actually interact with your body and with your nervous system. They interact with it in a way that is extremely aggressive and extremely tangible, that for those who are not prepared for this process, it can cause a lot of disorientation and a lot of things to come to the surface and really untether things that the person may not be fully prepared to deal with. First and foremost, not everybody is supposed to go through this extent of initiation. I'm not saying that to put myself on a high horse or anybody else, but it's not for everybody, okay? Everybody has a unique evolutionary process, a unique evolutionary path, and realistically, different sort of true will, okay? Someone's soul may not actually want them to go through the Qliphothic process, so then they'll either never hear about it, or they'll hear about it and then never do it. Whereas other people hear about the Qliphothic initiation, they start working with infernal spirits, and the Qliphoth just starts to follow them around to the point where they can't really escape it. Everywhere they go, there's talk of breaking shells, ego dissolution, and it gets to the point where people who are really receiving this calling, and those who have been through the initiation, or those who are being called to the initiation at this time, you may resonate with this. If it's your soul's path, the Qliphoth will follow you around until you accept that initiatory process. That is certainly what happened with me anyway. But it's extremely important to understand that going through this initiatory process is not a small endeavor. You are training your system to hold a lot of very chaotic cosmic energy, and you are undergoing a significant process of transformation and shadow-based metamorphosis. And you are going to change thoroughly as you go through the process. It is inevitable. So we're going to be discussing how these energies actually interact with the trauma that is stuck in your nervous system, how it interacts with initiates, and how Qliphothic energy interacts with people who are not going through the process consciously, as there is a very big difference between them. We're also going to be explaining the foundations of Qliphothic healing and how you can undergo this evolutionary path in an optimally grounded and authentic way. Very important piece of information for anybody who is going through the Qliphoth, has been through the Qliphoth, or is preparing for the Qliphoth, so definitely stay tuned. So in order to understand how Qliphothic healing interacts with the body, we first need to understand how trauma gets stuck within the nervous system and crystallized, and then causes that trauma to be projected outwards energetically and unconsciously. So this all starts by understanding the fact that we come into this tangible experience with energetic imprints that are based off of things that we have experienced in our previous lifetimes. So our previous lifetimes play a very important role in the type of physical experience that we are going to be birthed into. Our karma is what really defines this, okay? Karmic buildup that has been established from previous lifetimes impacts through energetic resonance alone the next lifetime that you are going to move into and the specific evolutionary process that you are going to go through within that lifetime. And this varies according to each individual on the microcosm. The whole purpose of the soul is to evolve and get to know itself in order to define a meaning for itself. In order for it to do that, the soul has to separate. Separates from the macrocosm, the collective, into the microcosm, which is us, in order to then play out its own individual meaning. So this causes us to move between lifetimes. And what impacts the next life that we move into is going to be the experiences and the decisions that we have made within that previous lifetime. As I've mentioned within my karmic backlash video, it's not as simple as good karma and bad karma. It's not as simple as you did this wrong within your past life and therefore you're going to experience the impact of that in the next life. That's not what I'm saying. What really defines good karma or bad karma is how aligned a particular intention and action is to the evolution of the soul. Okay, we all have a true will. We all have a soul level intention of being here in this tangible experience. And because we have free will, it is very easy to ignore that true will and project what we feel is right for us on the level of the false self, the level of the ego, into our process, and then actually move away from our true will. And this is what generates what you could call negative karma. Okay, negative karma causes a build-up within the system that if it's not dealt with, it can cause us to basically move into a perpetual cycle of living through that same karma time and time again. And this impacts what life you move into. Another way to interpret that would be Gnosticism when it comes to the soul trap and the demiurge. Okay, the demiurge is the false god, the false creator god, also known as Yaldabaoth, Yaldabaoth, also known as Yahweh, also known as Jehovah. This false creator god is a personification of the falsehood of humanity. Got to understand that the soul trap that is defined in Gnosticism is basically describing the karmic cycles of humanity. Because what causes us to get stuck within a karmic cycle is a continuous perpetual cycle actually away from our true will and according to the falsehood that we have self-created. Okay, so those who are not aware of Gnosticism, the demiurge is the false creator god that was created by Sophia by accident and was actually an ignorant god, okay, an ignorant god with immense levels of unchecked power that then cultivated or was said to cultivate this tangible universe that we are dwelling within and to cultivate it specifically to harvest the souls of human beings. Okay, and it's important not to dive into this too literally. Okay, the soul trap that is defined by Gnosticism basically refers to the continuous cycle of reincarnation that is impacted by the demiurge. Okay, but what this is really referring to on the karmic level is continuous perpetual karmic cycles that cause us to repeat the same karmic cycles throughout various different lifetimes. Okay, so basically the demiurge is your falsehood, and it's your falsehood, your illusion of knowing, that can very easily shift you away from your true will. Okay, and shifting you away from your true will and making decisions based off of something that is not your true will and not aligned to your truth is what is going to generate karmic backlash or negative karma. So it's basically that impacts the next lifetime that you are going to move into. So this body that you are in now has predefined energetic imprints that are stored within your energetic field and within your own body that hold a strong vibrational resonance to the things that you have experienced within your early years. So basically, past life trauma and karmic backlash and build-up impacts the particular generational line that you are going to be birthed into. I'll say that again. Past lives and karmic build-up from these past lives create the energetic resonance for you to move in to a particular generational line, which is what holds a clear vibrational resonance between ancestral trauma and past life trauma. So basically, the purpose of coming into this body is to experience a separation process whereby you consciously forget what you have built up within your previous lifetimes, but is still carried very much within your nervous system and within your energetic body and has impacted your early years experiences. So the trauma that you have undergone within your early years is somewhat orchestrated in order for you to go through a significant separation process in order to kickstart a process of karma purification. Okay, and as I've mentioned in previous videos as well, even good karma, okay, does not mean that it's going to manifest easy experiences. Okay, often a soul can clear a strong or a large amount of its karma in one lifetime, and that's generated good karma, which then opens them up to deeper existential lessons within that next lifetime. Okay, so the soul is crazy in terms of the evolution that it's wanting to attain. So when it comes to this trauma that's stuck in the body, it's impacted by past lives and is also impacted by the trauma that you've been through in your early years. Okay, we know on the soul level that we are going to go through that fragmentation process. It does not make it right, and it does not undermine the trauma that anyone has been through. Okay, it can very easily be interpreted in a way that is falling into spiritual bypassing, where it's like all of your trauma was supposed to happen, get over it. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we often need to undergo this level of trauma in order to kickstart a karma purification cycle that is, in the long run, later on in life, if we are willing through our free will to actually take up those opportunities, it's actually going to facilitate our journey back to our true will instead of causing re-traumatization. The issue is that our world is not actually built to facilitate evolution, so it causes many souls to perpetuate in the same karmic cycles of falsehood, driven by righteousness, and driven by patriarchy. And this is exactly the same as the soul trap that is described in Gnosticism, the soul trap of the demiurge. Okay, the demiurge being the false god. The false god refers to the false self, and the false self is what keeps us trapped within the same karmic cycles, because it causes us to gravitate away from our truth in exchange for righteousness and illusions of knowing. So everything that is stored within your body, everything that is stored within your nervous system, is the result of an electrical charge that has been generated from some past experience, no matter how big or small. This is why it's important to always acknowledge the trauma that we have been through, regardless of whether it was horrific or not. Okay, a lot of people within the Western world don't actually take ownership of the fact that they have experienced trauma because it hasn't been like an obvious trauma. Okay, it hasn't been like an obvious violent trauma, but often has taken place on a much more covert level of trauma fragmentation. So it's important to understand that everything that we undergo through our past experiences creates an electromagnetic charge throughout the nervous system that then impacts a significant crystallization process. And what initiates this crystallization process is when our false self tries to protect us from the pain that took place. Okay, so the trauma comes in, our false self, our egoic structures then take in that information, and they don't actually facilitate the transmutation of that feeling because it's trying to protect itself. So what happens is that it gets stuck in that portion of the system and actually gets encased within what you could call a symbolic shell, but that shell is symbolic of that crystallization process that happens within the body. So everything that you have experienced is going to create that reaction. Everything from the way that your mother spoke to you when you were a child. Everything from the rejection that your father gave you as a child. Everything from that girl that you try or guy that you tried to ask out in school and got rejected. Everything like that gets stored within the body and within the nervous system and then impacts how you behave and react as an adult unless that particular trauma is dealt with. So when we interact with Qliphothic initiation, I'll show it here. The Qliphothic initiation process is a path whereby we are willingly cracking open the crystallized emotions. Okay, so every Qlipha, every shell that you can see here, which are the spheres represent a whole share of different personas. And those personas are the protective mechanisms that have been established around your unmet needs. So what is held within this particular structure are the deepest, most repressed needs of your inner child that you have completely refused ownership of. But what is also held within this particular structure is an immense path of karma purification if you are willing to approach it in the right way. The reason for this is because when you are willingly cracking open these shells, you are willingly tapping into your crystallized emotions, which means that you are going to be purifying karmic imprints that have likely been in your generational line for centuries, as well as purifying karmic imprints that actually took place within previous lifetimes. How that actually works is simply because the Qliphoth is your nervous system. Okay, this is a map of your body. Okay, this is a dark map of your unconscious mind. Okay, everything within your body, within your nervous system that has been completely refused ownership of. So every single sphere is basically representing a whole share of different personas and represents a dormant energetic center that when activated is going to drastically sensitize the nervous system and bring repressed trauma up to the surface. This is why the Qliphoth can be seen as quite a, how do I put it, as quite an aggressive process, because you're actually going and ritually expanding your nervous system and you're saying to your soul, I'm ready to actually deal with the karma that I've come into this lifetime with. So what then happens when you start this initiatory process is that you shift timelines. Okay, you shift timelines from what you could call an ignorant slave-based consciousness, and you move into the path of the initiate, not just the path of the initiate, but the path of self-deification, which means that you are saying to your soul that I am ready to become a god. I am ready to become a god from within my physical body, which means that your soul's essence is going to respond to that. If it's aligned to your path, your soul is going to be very excited to go through this initiatory process. What will happen from that very moment you open that first sphere is that you will be opening that first center within your system. The bottom sphere represents the root, and then the next sphere up, Gamaliel, represents the sacral, and it works up like that all the way up to the crown. So what you're doing is that you're expanding your energetic centers as you are going through the process. From the moment you open that first sphere, your root chakra will expand and it will create an electromagnetic sort of let me sort of rephrase that. It will create an electrical response within your nervous system, which means that you are going to be taking in this deep psyche energy, this deep psyche qliphothic energy, this dark matter that resonates with your deep unconscious, and a two-way process is going to initiate. On one hand, you are bringing the energy of that qliphothic sphere into your body, but on the other hand, a reaction is going to kickstart that is actually going to evoke through magnetism alone. So each of these spheres represent symbolic aspects of your unconscious mind that have been rejected. And because the first sphere of Nehemoth, also known as Lilith, is the root chakra, you're going to start to go into your physical level trauma, which is going to tie directly to sexuality and the physical body as a whole. So you bring that qliphothic energy into you, it's going to flow into your nervous system, the energetic center is going to open, and then an electrical charge is going to be generated throughout your body, and you will feel that energy flow into you, and you will feel the sensitization process, okay? I cannot describe that feeling when you open that first qliphothic sphere. It's a mixture of excitement and a mixture of excitement and, oh shit, what have I just done? I'm sure everybody has experienced that who has gone into this qliphothic process. Initially when you open that first sphere, it's like, oh my God, it's happening. And because it's so tangible, you're bringing that dark earth energy up into your body, you can feel it tangibly within your system, which means, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, when I initiated into that first sphere, it created a significant sort of energetic sensation throughout my body. My whole body was vibrating with qliphothic essence and with qliphothic energy in a way that was so tangible to the point where it almost felt extremely psychedelic without even having a psychedelic. Okay, and every sphere does that in its own individual way. Every sphere is going to initiate a very powerful transmutation process that is going to then, through resonance alone, manifest a set of trials that are there specifically for you to break out of your perpetual karmic loops. And that is what the qliphothic initiatory trials are. What happens when you open a qliphothic sphere is that you bring the energy into you, sensitizes your nervous system, it starts moving through your body. How you know that you've successfully initiated into a qliphothic sphere is simply that you will feel it. Okay, you will feel the energy of it somewhat flowing through the system, and normally until you're done in that sphere, you will always feel the energy of the qliphothic sphere that you've just initiated into. Okay, when you initiate into it, the energy comes in, and in my view, it's quite progressive in the sense that it kind of starts to progress upwards. The intensity then peaks, and then it starts to then sort of flow back down again and then grounds back into the body. So every time you open a qliphothic sphere, that transmutation process will take place. But as that energetic center is being opened and that electrical response and electrical charge is being shot through your entire body and nervous system, what happens is that your energetic resonance is going to change. So you've just opened that shell, you've just tapped into the crystallized trauma that's stuck in your nervous system. So that means that is then going to be projected outwards, and that is going to then pull in an archetypal experience of that particular sphere. And what that basically is a manifestation of your own unprocessed trauma that is there specifically for you to break a karmic cycle. Okay, and the severity of these trials can really vary. Okay, can really vary. It does come through other people mostly. Okay, it comes through other people, interactions with other people that you have around you. Other people are often used as a vessel for these archetypal forces to start communicating with you, with the mere goal of you actually breaking the karma and the karmic loops that have been stuck within your body and nervous system. Okay, so what the qliphoth will initiate is a transmutation process that is there specifically to force your trauma to the surface. Okay, force your trauma to the surface in a way that is pretty aggressive and pretty tangible. And this is why you need to be prepared for this process. Okay, you are not just bringing in a dark energy. Okay, you're not just invoking a spirit. Okay, invoking a spirit is a very different experience to Qliphothic initiation. When you're invoking a spirit, you're bringing the current into you to be exposed to its alchemy. But when you send the spirit on its way, the energy will slowly start to stream out of you, or you will gradually start to metabolize that energy. Whereas with the Qliphoth, what you're doing is that you are actually opening your centers and then triggering a big reaction within all aspects of your body and nervous system that is there specifically for you to break your deeper rooted karmic bondages. Okay, and this is why people say that the Qliphoth is a form of Gnostic alchemy, and that it actually helps you escape the soul trap of the demiurge and escape the cycle of reincarnation. Whether that's true or not, who actually knows? Okay, many people say, oh yeah, no, I've escaped the cycle of reincarnation. It's like, okay, how do you possibly know that? Okay, how does your true will at its huge expansive capacity actually know that it's going to move into a different lifetime? And if you are connected to your true will to that extent, are you going to know from within a physical body? But the reason why people say that is because that's exactly what the Qliphoth is there to do. Okay, the soul trap of the demiurge is the repeating cycles of reincarnation, not necessarily reincarnation, but the repeating cycles of karma that just get more and more severe as souls continue to incarnate. So what you're doing when you go into the Qliphothic process is that you are making the decision to exit the perpetual cycles that you have been cycling within without actually realizing it. And before somebody says, oh, but I'm not cycling in any perpetual cycles, you are cycling in perpetual cycles. We are all doing it unconsciously without realizing it, until we make the decision to do something about it. And even when you've initiated through the entire Qliphoth, you're still going to have deeper work to do. You know, you're still going to have deeper levels of transmutation and integration to actually do. So you've got to understand that the process that initiates is one that is not just relating to this lifetime, but is actually dealing with trauma actively that has been built up from previous lifetimes as well. So the archetypal experiences that you get through the initiatory process is not just this lifetime, but is also previous lifetimes, which is why it can be quite difficult to comprehend and actually understand what you're going through, particularly when you get into the higher spheres. Okay, it's also important to understand that the way that the trauma comes to the surface is not actually in a way that you're going to be able to expect or foresee. Many people think that when you go into this process, you're going to all of a sudden feel a huge surge of emotions, and then you're going to cry every day and things like that. That's not always how your emotions come to the surface. Okay, how the psyche communicates with you is, yes, through feelings, yes, through memories, yes, through dreams and emotions, but a lot of the time it communicates through body sensations. And the Qliphoth is an extremely tangible somatic system. Okay, it's very somatic in the sense that you're not just working with cosmic forces, but you're working with your actual body and you're working with your actual nervous system when you do so. So it means that you're going to likely experience a lot of different sensations in your body, particularly when you're going through quite an extensive initiatory process within a given sphere or pathway. For myself, I'm in quite an extensive initiatory process at this moment in time. And as I'm talking, I can feel very tangible sensations flowing through my body. Even now, there are things processing within my body and nervous system that I may not be actually consciously aware of. Okay, and the question you got to ask is, do you need to be consciously aware of literally everything that you're processing? On some level, it's good to know, but at the same time, it's also important to realize that that's not how these energies work. Okay, do you have conscious recollection of all of your past lives? Can you remember all of your past lives? I don't think so. So the level of processing that's going to take place is going to be beyond what the conscious mind can comprehend. And the real lesson with the Qliphoth is actually, in being comfortable with not actually being able to fully see or comprehend or understand what it is that's going on. Because it's going to change your body and change you as a person. You're going to change so much, and your soul is literally going to be altered. Okay, it affects you on the soul level, and it basically means that if you're being affected on the soul level, then you're going to be undergoing alchemy that is beyond what you are able to consciously feel and realistically comprehend. So you've got to understand that each of these spheres triggers a reaction once you have initiated into it, a reaction that generates an electrical charge, changes your energetic resonance, and then manifests a series of initiatory trials that is there to basically flesh out the karma that is represented by that particular sphere. Each sphere is going to also represent various different masks. So with every sphere, you're going to go through significant levels of dissolution, particularly when you get past the abyss. Okay, when you go through the abyss, you're going to go through the ultimate annihilation. But when you get to the supernal triad, that annihilation is going to continue just in a much deeper way. Okay, when you get to the supernal triad, which is the top triad, the top three spheres, Satariel, Gagiel, and Thalmael, you're undergoing a level of alchemy that is a lot more dissolving in nature and a lot more fundamental. Okay, you're going through a level of dissolving that is a lot more fundamental in the sense that you're dealing with things and traumas that when they're processed are going to trigger very significant shifts in perspective. And those two spheres, Satariel and Gagiel, really do trigger a very significant turning point within your perception and within your initiatory process. The whole purpose of the dark supernal triad is to shatter the illusions of divinity as a whole, to completely shatter the illusions of very much everything that's holding society in place. With Satariel, it's all things relating to veils of illusion that have been established to conceal truth from yourself. So you're then dealing and basically dissolving those veils of illusion, not just for yourself, but also the collective consciousness and also for your past lives as well. When you get to Gagiel, you're dealing with the wounded divine masculine, the divine wounded masculine. With Beelzebub, you're dealing with the totalitarian gnosis. You're dealing with the unchecked power of the demiurge. You're dealing with how, you are emanating, unchecked power without actually realizing it. You're dealing with, your manipulative qualities, your narcissistic qualities. You're dealing with all of that on a deep, intimate level. So when you get past the abyss, you start to go through levels of dissolving, which is much more intangible, much harder to track, and very much requires a lot more surrender, in my experience, than the lower 7 spheres. The reason for that also is because you're reaching higher planes of existence. So if you're working up the energy field, obviously you start in Nehi-Moth, you're starting with the root, you're starting with the earth, tangible earth experience. Then you're moving up to the moon, which is Gamaliel, which is resonant with the sacral chakra. And then you're moving gradually up the system. When you cross the Da'ath, you're crossing into the higher planes of existence and then moving into the upper chakras. So from the third eye upwards, okay, it's very much Satariel and Gagiel, okay, and then you're dealing with Thalmael, which is at the top. It's the crown in that respect. So because in the supernal triad, you're dealing with much higher dimensional entities and much higher dimensional aspects of yourself, it really does create the sensation that you are in higher planes of existence, which means that it can be much more difficult to ground what you are experiencing within the energies of the supernal triad. Okay. So when you willingly open the Qliphoth, when you willingly go into the Qliphoth, you are consciously facing trauma that is stuck in your nervous system that without facing it is going to continue to affect you. Okay, without facing it, it's going to continue to affect you. And for some people, that continuation of karmic cycles is actually going to be at an evolutionary benefit. Okay, and it's difficult to say that for some, but it's true. You know, those perpetual karmic cycles that happen between lifetimes that some interpret as the demiurge's soul trap is actually aligned to a lot of souls, and a lot of souls are actually not ready to, you know, actually deal with the karma that they've built up in that way. Other souls will deal with it in completely different ways. Okay, will deal with it in completely different ways through more incarnations. Okay, whereas with the Qliphothic realms, you are making the decision to actually accelerate your evolution by actually interacting with energies that are going to force this repressed energy to the surface for you to process and integrate. And all you have to do is be willing to feel those things. Okay, this is how the Qliphothic energies interact with you. They come into your field and then evoke the repressed trauma. All you have to do is feel the trauma. All you have to do is feel the unmet needs, feel the body sensations, be present with yourself, feel those emotions that have been stuck within the system, and you will start to alchemize and integrate in your own way. Okay, so it is a very co-created process, but as I mentioned, not everybody is supposed to go through it, and not everybody is going to be able to effectively hold these energies, because it can be difficult to ground. You know, the energies can be difficult to ground, particularly as you get to the higher points in the initiation. As you get to the higher points in the initiation, Thaumiel and beyond, it's, you know, the energies that you're experiencing are so expansive and so liquid in nature, so void in nature, to the point where they are so sensitizing, to the point where they bring so much repressed trauma to the surface that there's no other option but to just surrender and let it happen. Okay, sometimes it can even feel quite debilitating. Okay, I remember, you know, going through a particular sphere and very much thinking, I'm literally sat here experiencing like multiple different timelines at the same time. I'm literally sat here like I'm experiencing this timeline. It's like a cross of realities that can happen, you know, and it can be very, very disorientating if somebody is not willing to flow with the process. Okay, it's going to be very confusing at times. It's going to be very disorientating. You're not going to be able to understand fully what you're undergoing, and neither is anybody else. And that's a big learning as well, particularly if you're in a partnership, particularly if you're in a relationship. You're going to be undergoing so much change, and it's, you know, it's hard, you know, to you know, actually be going through that much change and metamorphosis within yourself, and also comprehend holding another person as well. It is an extremely challenging process to undergo, and is one that many people, you know, do resist and don't fully process when they go through it. Okay, it is very much about giving yourself the time to rest and process and alchemize and metabolize these energies that you've exposed yourself to, because they're extremely expansive. They're also planetary gateways as well. So with the Qliphoth, you're dealing with the shadow aspects of the planets, you know, so overall it is just an extremely, you know, intense and tangible initiatory system that is there specifically to accelerate your evolutionary process. So the Qliphothic energy, quite simply, sensitizes the nervous system when you interact with it consciously. What happens when you interact with it unconsciously? Okay, what happens when you don't go into the Qliphoth, you choose to ignore it, and it continues to play out in the unconscious level? That's when Qliphothic energy can be harmful. Okay, Qliphothic energy is harmful to those who are not ready for it. Okay, those who are not actually ready to build a relationship with chaos, the Qliphothic energy is then re-traumatizing. Okay, and the reason for that is simply the righteousness of the external world, the righteousness of falsehood. We have been built to avoid chaos, and we've basically been built and programmed to avoid chaos at any cost. Okay, stick to false light, stick to a state of illusion of knowing, and hold on to that and hope that chaos doesn't come along and and knock us off our horse. Okay, this is the thing, you know, and this is why Qliphothic energy is dangerous for those who are, you know, not actually open and willing to face it. And that's because then people actually fall into the territory of being a victim to chaos. Okay, people often become a victim to the things that are then going on in their day-to-day lives, and then the false self, obviously, the demiurge, the false self, cannot view itself, cannot fully perceive itself. So that means that it's going to try and separate itself from the potential to change. And that means that often when people experience Qliphothic experiences, it then gets projected onto the external world and then gets projected onto the actual experience that's taking place instead of experiencing and seeing the bigger picture that's actually behind it. When you go into the Qliphoth consciously, you're making the decision to face chaos consciously, and in doing so, it's going to significantly build your resilience to be able to actually deal with life's inevitable challenges in a way that is optimally grounded and in a way that is optimally resilient, and in a way that actually supports the use of your emotions instead of the suppression of your emotions. Okay, Qliphothic energy forces your emotions to the surface, and our society is built to suppress emotions. Okay, the majority of the modern therapeutic system is there to cope with emotions. It's there to cope with situations, as opposed to actually deal with the emotions, as opposed to actually feeling the emotions. And then the love and light new age community jumps on that and says, if you feel your emotions, then you're going to attract a lifetime's worth of turmoil, when it really doesn't work like that. But that belief system and viewpoint is extremely destructive with the Qliphothic energy as a whole. So you could say that it's not actually the Qliphothic energy that is causing the re-traumatization for the external world, but is the external world's response to the unconscious mind bringing situations into their being to try and force change. When your soul wants you to change and you're not listening to it, then rupture will be caused. Okay, and the Qliphoth shows you that sometimes this rupture is absolutely necessary. This rupture is absolutely necessary for many people to actually start to break certain karmic cycles that would have been continuously perpetual if that particular rupture had not happened. Okay, and if you go into a process like the Qliphoth and then try and ignore what's coming up, then that's when your unconscious mind is going to then manifest the essence of that sphere in tangible challenges within the world around you. Okay, tangible challenges. Okay, everything that you experience when it comes to chaos within your external world all has deep and rich symbolism to what is going on within your nervous system and within your own body. So everybody interacts with Qliphothic energy unconsciously. Everybody experiences manifestations that come into being, tangible manifestations that come into being as a result of change that the true will is trying to initiate. But most people fall a victim to it, and very few people actually know how to process, feel, and use their emotions in a way that is actually going to help to break that perpetual cycle. Okay, and the whole purpose of the Qliphoth is teaching you how to use your emotions, not suppress them, but use them and not fall a victim to them from the unconscious mind. So those who do not interact with Qliphothic initiation and don't interact with any Qliphothic energy consciously are still going to have experiences with it, because we all have a deep unconscious, which means that regardless of whoever's path is being played out, whether they're on a conscious healing journey or not, the deep unconscious currents of energy are there specifically to help you to grow in accordance with what your true will is wanting. And if your free will is ignoring that call and it's getting trapped in falsehood, that's when ego-shattering rupture happens in the external world in order to break that symbolic shell. So you could say that everybody undergoes a type of Qliphothic initiation in their day-to-day lives, but they're not actually interacting with the initiatory technology consciously. That's a different evolutionary process altogether. So initiation, very, very different to unconscious interactions with the Qliphothic forces. Anybody who says I've gone through the Qliphoth, involuntarily, I've been forced through the Qliphoth, that's, yeah, ignore that, okay? Because that's not actually how this works, okay? You have free will. You have to consciously choose to initiate. If somebody says I have been through the Qliphoth unconsciously without realizing it, they are spiritually bypassing the Qliphoth, okay? And many people do it, okay? Many people see that there is opportunity for evolution in the Qliphoth, and then you could say their false self then actually builds an illusion, okay, builds an illusion around it that is actually there specifically to try and shift them away from that evolutionary process, because the false self knows that it's going to be threatened, okay. It is also a very long process as well. Qliphothic metamorphosis is not a quick process, okay? I would say to go through the spheres, you're talking over a year to go through the spheres and actually ground the spheres, okay? To actually ground them, okay? You can open up all the spheres, okay? And many people, I think, open up all the spheres within a space of a few months and then say, I've done it. But then what is going to unfold after that, I can't even say. If you open up all of those spheres too prematurely, then there's going to be a lot of different trials that are going to manifest thereafter. So what I would say is be quite dubious of people who are saying that they've been through the Qliphoth in the space of 6 months, or they've been through the entire Qliphoth and all of the tunnels of Set in the space of a few months. Okay. And I remember someone said that to me once, and I was like, really? So you've been through all 10 spheres and the abyss, as well as all 22 tunnels of Set, which are the tunnels that interconnect the spheres. You've been through all of that within the space of a year. And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Because meanwhile, I'm working, with myself. I spent, like literally like 3 months in the abyss. And then, almost that same length of time within the spheres of the supernal triad. Obviously, my process is different to theirs, but I've also seen other people who are actually sinking into the Qliphothic process are going through very long processes of initiation. So if it takes that long for somebody to actually process and ground the energies of the sphere workings, that's just the sphere workings, let alone the tunnels of Set, which are even more overwhelming. So, I would be quite suspicious of those who are saying that they've been through it within the space of a few months. It's a self-paced initiation, and if you feel called to speed it up, then you do feel called to speed it up. There's no room for guidance, or just sort of set guidance within a pursuit which is as personal as this particular process. But just be quite careful about who you're absorbing the information from. Is there the fear mongering? Is there grounded information? And things like that with the Qliphothic energy, because it is extremely common and it's not really gate kept in any capacity anymore, which is a good thing. But it also means that people jump on it and start using it as a badge to hide from themselves even more. Okay, so to sum up, the Qliphothic energy and Qliphothic healing is a two-way process. It's a process of bringing the energy into the field, opening up the repressed trauma in the nervous system, which then triggers an electrical response within the nervous system, which causes experiences and karma to then be lived out at a much quicker and more direct pace than if you are not interacting with these particular energies. It can work the same for invocations as well, but it's not black and white. Invocations are really dependent on how often you actually do the invocations and how often, how thorough you're actually being. Okay, so many people, just go from, spirit to spirit to spirit and don't actually integrate any of it in that sense. When in reality, it's better to just go to one spirit and then sink into that energy and really tap into the full power and potential of that particular current. And it does work in a similar way, in the sense that you're bringing an energy in, and it causes a type of internal evocation process of the emotions that are stuck within the body. But when you're actually going through the initiatory system of the Qliphoth, going through the spheres, doing the sphere workings, and doing the pursuit of the tunnels of Set after, you're going through a much bigger process of metamorphosis that is irreversible in nature and is, in a sense, making a contract with your soul to actually commit to breaking through all of your karmic debt that has been built up within this particular lifetime, which involves, not just this lifetime, but also, processing of deep ancestral wounds, processing of mother's wounds, processing of father's wounds, processing of grandfather's wounds, grandmother's wounds, great grandmother's wounds, great grandfather's wounds, as well as numerous past lives as well. So, very powerful process. The energies that you bring into your system are there to really help you to build resilience on a different level, but not everybody is supposed to go through this initiatory process. And Qliphothic metamorphosis and healing is an extremely powerful pursuit. Okay, extremely powerful pursuit and a very disorientating pursuit as well. Don't expect to go into this type of self-development path and come out on the other side knowing exactly what your soul wants. Okay, because that process is much bigger and much more expansive. With this, you're just making the commitment to deepen it permanently for the rest of your life. Okay, so very, very big process. If you need any assistance with preparing for your process, or you're going through a process within your Qliphothic initiation, feel free to get in touch if you need to. My membership programs are perfect for people who are preparing for this initiatory system. But for now, thank you guys. Definitely hit like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.